Everyone. Welcome to World Breastfeeding Week. This is the last day. And this is Amanda Glenn from exclusivepumping.com. We're going to do some information on tips for success of exclusive pumping. I am Amanda Powell from the Maine State Breastfeeding Coalition. I'm the vice president. And I'm going to be putting some links to things in the chat. Feel free to put any questions there. I also wanted to thank our sponsors, Maine Mothering Company in Brunswick, Maine. They are a great place. I love them for moms to gather and also receive different services from lots of different types of practitioners. So I'll put their link in the chat also. So I will turn it over to Amanda. She's going to do a little bit of an intro and then do a presentation from there. And then we can do questions at the end.
Hi. I'm on everything. Okay. My name's Amanda. I am a certified lactation counselor and the author of exclusivepumping.com. So I started my website, exclusivepumping.com, after I exclusively pumped for my son, Henry. We really struggled with him gaining weight, and he, at the breast, and I tried tons of different things and it just wasn't working. And so I ended up exclusively pumping. And at the time, there just wasn't a lot of information out there on what to do it and how, how to do it and everything like that. So I had to pick it up in bits and pieces from the internet. So I decided to just write everything down in one place. And that's kind of how this started. So I put together, I'm going to share my screen, a presentation to kind of talk through some of my best tips. Can you see my screen okay, Amanda? Okay, my best tips for success. So first I have just kind of what is exclusive pumping, why people exclusively pump, and then kind of the key things that it's important to keep in mind, what should your schedule look like? How frequently should you pump? How long should your sessions be? Can you establish a supply when you're exclusively pumping? How to store all the milk that you pump, all of that stuff. So I'm going to start with kind of defining exclusive pumping. And so just keep in mind that no one put me in charge of defining this, but how I define it is that exclusive pumpers feed their babies pumped breast milk and they don't nurse their babies for feedings. But sometimes they supplement with formula or the baby eats solid foods. So the idea is really that the exclusive part isn't to do with the milk like it is with exclusive breastfeeding. It's to do with the fact that the baby is fed breast milk, but not nursed at all. So why do people exclusively pump? So there's a ton of different reasons. I put a screenshot of an Instagram poll I did. Obviously, Instagram polls aren't particularly scientific, but I think they can kind of give you a sense. So the question that I asked was, did you choose to exclusively pump, or did you want to nurse and then you ended up exclusively pumping because it didn't work out? And so of the people that answered, 27% wanted to exclusively pump and 73% tried to nurse and then it didn't work out. And so of those 73%, those reasons kind of break down. And with, the baby refusing to nurse, just not wanting to, despite trying all the tricks and everything. Physical reasons like cleft palate, difficulty with gaining weight. This is kind of what I was talking about, where, I would, go see a lactation consultant and they would check the latch and they said it was perfect. And then we do a weighted feed and he would have gained like 0.2 ounces or something like that. It just, doesn't seem to be working as well. A lot of times people have babies in the NICU, and so they end up exclusively pumping, while their baby is being tube fed or whatever, and then they have difficulty establishing nursing later. Sometimes baby gets teeth, and then biting becomes an issue, and all the tips and tricks that you can try when baby starts biting, maybe aren't working. And then in that 27%, you have that, the wanting to provide baby with breast milk, but for whatever reason, not liking the idea of nursing. Sometimes this is just a personal preference. Sometimes it's due to previous sexual abuse and sexual trauma having to deal with the breast. And so that's that 27% there. And so one really common misconception is that it's not possible to establish a supply when you're exclusively pumping. So I put another Instagram poll I did down there. Again, not scientific, but can just kind of give you a sense. So I asked people to categorize themselves into one of three groups. Oversupplier, which means that you consistently pump more than your baby takes in a given day. So let's say that your baby takes 30 ounces a day, maybe you're pumping 35 or 40. Just enougher. So you're pumping right around what your baby takes. Maybe you have an extra ounce or two. So if your baby takes 30 ounces, maybe you're pumping 31, 32. Under supplier, obviously that's pumping less than baby takes. So maybe your baby takes 30 and you're pumping 20. Um, so I asked them to put them in that category. And so of the people that responded, 80% were able to establish a full supply while exclusively pumping. And so it's really not true that you need to latch your baby in order to establish a supply. However, there are some people who don't respond as well to the pump as others. And I think that a lot of times, so we see that like, so you have a parent who's nursing their baby and then they go back to work and they're not able to keep up with what their baby is taking in childcare. And so a lot of times what they're told, and this can be true, is that your baby or your pump can't possibly be effective as a baby. And I think that's where this whole idea comes from, that you can't establish a supply when you're exclusively pumping. Um, and so I think, there's a bunch of issues that can come into play that are the reason behind not being able to keep up with your baby. Some of it is, maybe, the childcare provider should be doing pace bottle feeding. Other times it's just that maybe, you've trained your body to respond to a nursing situation rather than to a pump. So the people that don't respond as well to the pump, a lot of times there are things that can help, like incorporating hand expression in your routine. Sometimes you're able to get a letdown faster if you incorporate hand expression. Some people respond better to a manual pump than to an electro pump or to a silicone pump like a Haka into the routine. So the overall point of this is that it is possible to establish a supply when you're exclusively pumping for quite a few people. So the next question that I get frequently is how frequently should you pump? What should your schedule look like? So I think that you need to take into account 4 different things when you think about this. So the first one is the age of your baby. So the younger your baby, the more important it is to frequently remove milk from your breasts. That's because there's a theory called the prolactin receptor theory, which is that the more frequently milk is removed in the early days of breastfeeding, the more prolactin receptors there are, and then the more milk that you can make over your breastfeeding journey. So when your baby's younger, it's important to remove milk more frequently than it is later on. Another thing to think about is your milk supply. So if you're, an undersupplier, maybe more frequent sessions would be better for you. If you're an oversupplier, you might have a little bit more leeway on doing fewer sessions. Your goals for exclusively pumping. So let's say that you're 1 month postpartum and you have a goal of pumping for a full year. You need to be a little bit more conservative in how you drop sessions and how many sessions you do than if you're 1 month postpartum and your goal is to exclusively pump for 3 months. So it's just another thing to take into account. And then the last thing is what you can handle. So if you have PPD, or if you have twins, or if you have an unsupportive partner, or your partner is deployed, you're going to be able to handle a different kind of pumping schedule than someone who's, mother lives with them and is happy to take the baby every time that they need to pump, right? So it's just another thing to take into account in terms of like what is realistic for you. So with all that said, in terms of like the things that you should take into account when you are putting together a pumping schedule, is if you have a newborn, I would aim for 7 to 10 sessions a day. And so, in that range, like how do you decide whether it's 7 or 10? So, that's where you take into account your goals and what you can handle and your milk supply. Like if you are pumping more than enough and your goal is shorter, maybe you go for 10. But if you are really trying to get your supply up, maybe you go for 7, maybe you go for 10 if you're really trying to get your supply up. And then you want to space those as evenly as you reasonably can, right? Like you wouldn't want to do 7 sessions in the morning and then nothing for 16 hours. But a longer break at night is fine. So what I did was I would pump for the last time at 7 p.m. and then my husband would take care of our baby until midnight. Well, I would get like 1 interrupted block of sleep, and then I would pump at midnight and then take care of the baby for that. And that really helped me like kind of stay sane. So 1 slightly longer break is totally fine. And then as your baby gets older, you may be able to pump less frequently. So, in the newborn phase, that first 3 months, you're going to be wanting to do 7 to 10 times a day. As time goes on, at 6 months, I was pumping 4 times a day. So you can kind of drop sessions as time goes on. And then so the next question tends to be, how long should your sessions be? So most of the time you want to aim for 120 minutes over a 24-hour period. And so you can kind of figure out how long your session should be by figuring out how many sessions you have, right? So if you have 8 sessions a day, that'd be 15 minutes, seven would be 17 to 18 minutes, 6 sessions would be 20 minutes. And the goal of the 120-minute, we call it a rule, but it's really more of a guideline, is to protect your supply long term, and help you establish your supply and then just kind of protect it over time. And one thing I did want to note is that this guideline is not based in research because no one has studied it. It's just kind of like a best practice that's been noted among exclusive pumpers since breast pumps became good enough that exclusive pumping could become a thing. It might not apply to everyone. Like, I'm a big fan of nuance when talking about like what works best for your situation. Just as a general starting point, that's what I would start with. Okay, so let's talk about what kind of pump that you should use. So I kind of put breast pumps into 4 different categories. So we have manual pumps where you power them with a hand crank, and then you have single electric pumps where you have a motor and you can pump one side at a time. Double electric pumps where you can pump both sides at the same time with a motor, and then the wearable pumps that kind of just go in your bra and they're self-contained in there. So what I would recommend for exclusive pumpers is ideally a double electric pump that has a rechargeable battery attached. Um, so examples of that are the Spectra S1 or the Medela Freestyle Flex. However, you can also get a portable battery to go with most other pumps. So a lot of people who have a Spectra S2, for example, use a Talent Cell battery pack. You can get them on Amazon for like $30. So yeah, and so just the one thing to make sure to check with the portable battery is that it matches the voltage of your pump. So breast pumps are generally either 9 volt or 12 volt. And you just want to make sure you have the right one so you don't fry your pump. So that'd be what I would recommend. And that's just because a double electric pump saves you so much time when you're pumping. And then the battery is really key for being able to move around and not be attached to the wall for 120 minutes a day for a year, basically. I also recommend, if you can, getting a manual backup pump. This is in case your pump breaks. So let's say you have a Spectra S2 and it breaks. It's under warranty. You contact Spectra. They overnight you a new one. It's still 24 hours where you need to be removing milk from your breasts. Otherwise, it could affect your milk supply or you could get a clogged duct or mastitis. So having a manual backup can be really helpful. It can also be really helpful if your power goes out, because, again, you need to be consistently removing milk. If you're only able to get a single electric pump for whatever reason, I would recommend getting a silicone pump or a Haka that I talked about, and using it on one side and using the Haka on the other, and then switching it halfway through the session and seeing if that works well for you. You kind of have to play around with your routine, but a lot of people are able to exclusively pump with a single electric pump if they have that silicone pump as well. And then I think that the wearable pumps are awesome second pumps. They can be great for sessions when you need to, be on the go, when you're taking care of your baby, when baby won't be put down. I think they're wonderful. I have some concerns about establishing supply with them. And so that's why I would recommend always having a double electric pump, especially for the beginning phases. So I think the wearables are great for a second pump, but like I did another poll, I didn't screenshot and put it on here, but I asked if you had a wearable pump and a double electric pump, do you get more output with the double electric versus the wearable? And I think 70% said they did. And so that's why I just have some concerns about using it to establish supply. So let's talk about breast pump settings. So there are 3 things to kind of know when it comes to breast pump settings. There's 3 different kind of buttons or things that you can adjust. So the first one I'm going to talk about is on the bottom. So that's the mode. So different pumps will call this different things. So Medela calls it letdown mode. Spectra calls it massage mode. A lot of people call it bacon mode because it has those 3 wavy lines. So whatever you want to call it. So this is the mode that most of the time you want to start in, because this is what encourages your milk to start flowing. So, normally, you're sitting around, you don't have milk just coming out of your breasts all the time, right? Like, leaks aside. So what usually happens is that if like a nursing parent, their baby would stimulate their breast and that would cause their milk to release. If you're a pumping parent, then your pump would do that. And so the letdown mode is designed to give the same stimulation that encourages your milk to let down. And then the other mode is expression mode, which is designed to more efficiently extract the milk from your breasts, right? So the letdown mode is light and fast, and then the expression mode is slow and low. So that's kind of what the mode is. So I think I'm going to talk on the next slide about how to handle that. But so that's the first thing that you have to the first setting rather. The next setting I want to talk about is vacuum strength. So this is how strong the pump pulls. So this, those the up or down buttons, basically you can adjust how strong it's pulling, and then the cycle speed is how frequently it's pulling. So a lot of times I think this is measured in how many sucks per minute. So if it's 60 in there, that would mean that it's sucking 60 times a minute, for example. So which settings should you use? So what I generally recommend doing is using letdown or massage mode until your milk lets down. And so you might notice that when you start pumping, you see like a dribble of milk coming out, and then at some point you might notice that it starts to spray. That that's what it looks like when your milk lets down. Some people feel it as well as like a pins and needles sensation. Um, and so I would recommend using letdown or massage mode until you see that happen or feel it happen, and then push the button and switch to expression. After a while, you might notice that the milk stops spraying and goes back to a dribble. At that point, you might want to hit the button again and go back into letdown mode and see if you can get another letdown in your pumping session. In terms of vacuum strength, you want to use the strongest vacuum strength that is comfortable for you. So what I would recommend doing is, hitting the plus button or turning the knob, however your pump works, until you start to feel a little discomfort, and then turning it back one notch. And that should be the best vacuum strength for you. Um, and then in terms of cycle speed, there's no right answer here. Not all pumps even allow you to adjust this. Medela pumps do not, but Spectre pumps do. So if your pump allows you to adjust it, I would just play around with it and see what works best for you. But I would just start with whatever the default is and not be too concerned about it. So let's talk about storing your breast milk. Why do we have breast milk storage guidelines? So breast milk is like any food. It'll spoil over time due to bacterial growth. And then, some of the good stuff like vitamins and antioxidants will kind of degrade and be lost. So breast milk storage guidelines are written to know how long you can store your milk before these things happen. So if you've ever Googled like how long can breast milk be kept at room temperature, you might notice that there are varying guidelines out there. And so the reason for that is that you can kind of put it into three different categories that I've written out here. Ideal, which means that, it's fresh from the tap, it's just pumped, it's not spoiled, all the good stuff is still there. And then you have okay, where it's not spoiled and, maybe it's been out on the counter for like 4 hours and it's degraded a little bit, but some of the good stuff is still there. And then bad, which is obviously you don't want to feed spoiled breast milk to your baby. And so the okay time frame is where I think you see some variation in breast milk storage guidelines. So I have down here, so on the left, I have the CDC guidelines for storing milk. And then in parentheses, I have kind of what you might see in other places and, when that might be acceptable. So the CDC says that you can store fresh milk for 4 hours at room temperature. Other sources might say up to 6 to 8 hours is okay in clean conditions or lower temperatures. So um, there's a big difference between, let's say that it's summer and you don't have air conditioning and it's 80 degrees in your house. And that's room temperature for you versus I live in Chicago in the winter, my house is 62 degrees. Like 82 and 60 degrees are very different temperatures, right? So if you're in the warmer temperature, I would definitely adhere to the 4 hour timeline. If you're in a cooler temperature, it may be okay to go a little longer, especially, if you're very careful about cleaning your breast pump and everything. It's good for 4 days in the fridge. Some sources say up to 8 days are okay. And then the CDC says within 6 months is preferred in the freezer and up to 12 months is acceptable. They used to distinguish between side-by-side freezers and deep freezers, but they don't anymore. This is just a blanket guideline, which makes things much less confusing. In terms of thawed milk can be stored in the fridge for 24 hours after it's finished thawing. That's not from when you take it out. This is a important clarification point. So when you take breast milk out of the fridge to thaw, it can take, 12 hours to thaw. So the 24-hour clock doesn't start until it has finished thawing. Thawed milk can also be stored for 1 to 2 hours at room temperature, and you shouldn't refreeze thawed milk. The next thing, I made a bunch of slides that are kind of just general tips for success, things that I want to talk about. So the first one is absolutely, if you're exclusively pumping, I would definitely recommend getting a hands-free pumping bra. If you don't have a wearable breast pump. If you have a wearable breast pump, you don't need one because they just go in your nursing bra. So this, if you're spending 120 minutes a day for however many days pumping, it makes your life so much easier if you can do other things. Like, so when I was pumping at work, I would hook myself up to pump with a hands-free bra and then work on a laptop. I could hold my baby and feed with the hands-free bra. It just made everything a lot easier. So there are two kinds, generally speaking, that are available. So the one that I have there on the right is an integrated one. So this one is pretty simple. So it's just a nursing bra, and then it has flaps that you can bring down when it's time to pump, and then you can just insert your breast shields in there. And then there's the corset style, which you would only wear when you pump, and it kind of goes around your torso and wraps around and holds up your breast shields that way. And so these are both great. I've used both. Which one works best for you? I think it depends a lot on, whether or not you already have a bunch of nursing bras. Like if you already have a full wardrobe of nursing bras and you don't need any more, it might make more sense to just get a corset style one, because then you just only have to buy one thing, because obviously you have to wash your nursing bras. And so you need to buy at least two or three, I would say, if you're exclusively pumping. So personal preference, but I would definitely recommend getting one. And then let's talk about breast shield sizing. So this is something I had no idea about when I was exclusively pumping. So the first time I was pumping, I came home from the hospital. I was exhausted because I had slept like 3 hours over the last 3 days, and I needed to pump. And so like I put this pump together, and I just used whatever. I just probably grabbed a set of breast shields out of it and used those. And I had no idea that they need to be sized correctly for you. So if you pump with breast shields that are too big, it can pull in too much of your areola tissue, and that can cause pain. If you use breast shields that are too small, it can irritate your nipple tissue, and that can also be painful. It can also make pumping inefficient because your milk ducts are being compressed in a way that, the pump wasn't designing for them to do. Um, One thing that's important to note that I did not know also is that flange size is based on your nipple size, not your breast size. So it's possible to, have small breasts but need a large flange size, and vice versa. It's because it's the size of your nipple that matters. So a lot of times, with some pumps come with one set of flanges, some come with two sizes. So what I would do is just, if you're new to this, is to just try out what you have, see how it feels. If you have another set, try those out. If you're not sure if it's the right size, there's a couple things you can do. One thing I would suggest is to Google uh, breast shield measurement, or flange size measurement. And there are printable rulers that you can download and then use that to measure your nipple size to see what the right size for you should be. Another option is to get a virtual fitting, or an in-person fitting. Obviously, that's a great option too, if you're able to do that where you are. But if you're not, there are places that will do virtual flange fittings for you, and like just look at videos of you pumping, and they'll help you figure out what the right size is. If for whatever reason, let's say that you've tried 5 different flange sizes and you can't find one that works for you, often the issue is something called elastic nipples. And so what this is it means that your nipples, when you're pumping, are stretching. Um, tend to stretch pretty far into the breast shield. So like if you're pumping and you notice that your nipples are almost touching the back of the connector, for example, that tends to be elastic nipples. And so what we suggest there is usually a different shape or material breast shield can fix the issue. So for example, Pump and Pals make silicone breast shields that are a slightly different shape that can be helpful. So does Lactec. And then Bojan cushions are another option. They're made of silicone, and they can help like, what's the word I'm looking for? Grab isn't the right word, but kind of like hold onto the tissue better so it doesn't stretch as much, and it can make pumping less painful and more efficient. Okay, so let's talk about washing pump parts. So again, when I came home from the hospital and I was pumping, I had no idea what I was doing. Like I kind of kept the whole pump parts together and just kind of did my best to like get in there with the bottle brush. So I made a little diagram on the bottom, like that has like the steps for it, even though they might seem a little obvious because I didn't know step 2, for example. Um, so one thing to note is that the CDC recommends that pump parts and bottles and all infant feeding items be washed after every use, and they recommend washing them in a wash basin rather than directly in the sink. So you can get a wash basin from Amazon or Target, or if you even have just like even a big pot that you have in your house. It doesn't. You don't have to go buy something different. If you have like just a different container that you can put water in and wash in, that's totally fine too. And the reason for that is that bacteria from food can get into the sink, and then that in the past has contaminated pump parts and caused issues. So how you wash them, it's pretty simple, so you want to wash in a wash basin. You want to take all the pump parts apart. You want to use a bottle brush that you're only using for infant feeding items, and then scrub in hot soapy water. And then the CDC recommends allowing pump parts to air dry completely before storing them. You don't want to put them away when they're damp or anything like that. If you do need to dry them for whatever reason, use a clean paper towel. Like don't use the towel that you use to like wipe down the counters or anything like that. Just make sure it's a clean paper towel. Another option is the dishwasher. So what I would recommend there is before you do this is just checking your breast pump instruction manual to make sure that all the parts can go in the dishwasher. If you don't have it anymore, just Google it. There's going to be a PDF online that has the instruction manual, and just look for that section. Because some manufacturers don't want you putting the duckbill in the dishwasher, that kind of thing. So just confirm that it can all go in. And then I would suggest getting like a dishwasher basket. So that none of the little parts like fall off the top shelf or anything like that. So that's another option. And that also sterilizes them at the same time. Um, let's talk about, okay, so another tip that I would recommend for success is if you are able to figure out how to feed baby while you pump, that can save a ton of time. So I have a picture there of someone in our Facebook group who was, I think the caption for this picture was, "It's all happening," because she was so excited that she figured out how to do this. And so, the reason for this is if you are exclusively pumping, and let's say that, you don't have anyone with you to help feed the baby. So let's say it takes you, 20 minutes to pump. And then, especially with a newborn, it can take a while to feed. So it takes you half an hour to feed. And then, you got to start this whole process again in an hour and a half. So if you can cut that time in half, like that can just save you a ton of time. So people do this different ways. So in this picture, she's got her hands-free bra on, and then she's got her baby next to her on a boppy. I like to do this with my baby on my lap, but you can just kind of experiment with different things and see what works for you. And it might not work the first few times you do it, especially like if you have a baby that has reflux or needs to be burped a lot, like, maybe this won't work for you. But for other people, I would suggest like trying it, maybe it doesn't go as well, but then trying it again the next day and just, see if you can get the hang of it, because it will save you a ton of time. Another tip for success that I have is setting up a pumping station. So the picture that I have here is, a pumping station that's set up on a rolling cart so that you can kind of move it from room to room. So the purpose of a pumping station is basically so that, let's say that you're pumping 8 times a day. You don't want to be searching around your house 8 times a day. Where did I leave my charging cord? Where did I leave my hands-free pumping bra? Where did I leave my coconut oil? All the stuff that you need. It's much easier if you have it all set up in one place. And if you are always pumping in the same place, then it's fine to just, have a place where you keep all your stuff. But if you, need to move around the house, a lot of people put it on a rolling cart, like in this picture. I have the same cart, and I think I got it from the Container Store for like $30. So it doesn't have to be like super expensive, and it's pretty easy to put together. But just having a pumping station as an exclusive pumper just saves a lot of time and stress. And then another tip that I have is to replace your pump parts. So another thing that I didn't know. So pump parts tend to wear out over time. They get microscopic tears, residue can build up, and they just stop working as well. And so this can affect the suction from your pump, and that in turn can also affect your milk supply because as you always hear, milk supply is based on demand, right? So the more milk that you remove from your breasts, the more supply that you have, and vice versa. So if you're removing less milk from your breast because the suction isn't working as well, then that can affect your milk supply. So I was pumping at work, and one day I replaced it. I think because it broke, actually. One of my valves broke, and I replaced it, and I was like, oh my God, this is so much stronger than it was before. And the change was just so gradual that I hadn't noticed. And so it's important to kind of proactively replace your pump parts. How often you should do this, it depends on a couple of things. One, what the manufacturer recommends. Some manufacturers say that, like duckbill should be replaced every month. Medela with their new pump parts says that they don't need to be replaced unless they're damaged. They're pretty new, so we haven't really tested that out. I don't know that that's necessarily true, but so what the manufacturer recommends may make a difference. The other thing is the part itself. So valves and duckbills generally need to be replaced a lot sooner than, say, a breast shield does, or a backflow protector. If you online, you can find like different charts that say when you should replace them. Another thing I want to note, a tip that a lot of people don't know, is that you may be able to get replacement pump parts free through your insurance. So let's say that you got your your free breast pump through insurance through like say Aeroflow breast pumps through the medical device company. What I would recommend is reaching out to them and finding out if you qualify for replacement parts. It obviously depends on your insurance policy, but I've heard of people who like get new parts automatically shipped to them every 3 months from the medical device company through their insurance. So that can save you a ton of money if that's something that your insurance covers. And I think this is my last tip, which is to practice pumping on the go. So again, if you're going to be exclusively pumping 8 times a day, 6 times a day, you don't want to be stuck at home, pandemic aside, for a year, right? You need to be able to take your baby to the pediatrician. You need to be able to like go to your older children's soccer games. You need to be able to, go on date night or whatever. And so you'd want not to be tied to your house the entire time that you're exclusively pumping. Um, and so, what I would recommend if you've never done it before is to make your first time doing it kind of an easy win. So, like an example might be maybe your partner's home and can take care of the baby. You practice packing up your breast pump bag. Maybe you drive down the street, park your car, and pump, right? And what'll that do? Like that'll help you like figure out like, okay, where did I go wrong with packing my bag? Like the first time I did it, I forgot caps for the bottles. So like the pumping part went fine, but then like I was like, okay, how do I get these bottles home without spilling the milk everywhere? And how do I store it and everything like that? So it helps you kind of troubleshoot that, figure out any issues with your strategy. It can help you like troubleshoot how are you going to power your pump. So let's say that you need a battery pack, or maybe you bought a new car adapter until to be able to pump on the go. So that'll allow you to like practice with that and make sure that everything's working there. And then, like how comfortable do you feel? Like, do you need a nursing cover or do you feel comfortable pumping without one? Like, what do you need? So it's just a good way to practice. And then you can kind of level up from there, right? Like you can, maybe the next one you take your baby with you and you go to the library and you just park in the car before you go in or after you go in, and maybe the time after that you can pump with a nursing cover at a soccer game or whatever you need to do. So but that's just one thing that I would definitely recommend practicing before you need to do it, because that way it'll be less stressful. So I think that is all I have, but I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone has.
Thank you so much. That was great. If anybody has questions, they can put them in the chat or you can unmute and ask them. You have a wealth of knowledge in front of you, so I recommend using it. We have a question in the chat. Any recommendations for what to include in your pumping cart?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So I would include your hands-free pumping bra, your charger, or like, so if you have a rechargeable pump, I would include the charger. Obviously, you're going to need it every time if your pump doesn't have a battery. Your pump itself. So nipple cream, if you are using any kind of lubrication, either before you pump or after you pump, I would definitely recommend having that. A lot of people have water bottles because that way they can remember to drink every time they pump. I like to keep a baby blanket on mine just because like when you're disconnecting, sometimes drops fall on your lap and then it like, gets your pants dirty. So I always kept like a baby blanket on my lap when I did that. What else would I recommend? I would also obviously recommend having anything you need if you're taking care of your baby while you are pumping. So, if your baby has like needs certain pacifiers, for example, that you're always, you don't want to have to like run up and get them, or just whatever your baby might need. If you need to entertain your baby, I'm trying to think of what else. I think that covers most of it. Just whatever you generally need while pumping is what I would recommend. I hope that helps.
Thanks. And then another question, if you plan before birth to exclusively pump, do you have tips on how to begin from day one?
Yes. So I actually have, and maybe I can put a link to it in the chat. I have a free download on my website that's basically a complete starter kit that like walks you through like what to buy before you have your baby, what to do before you have your baby, what to do in the hospital, all that stuff. I'm going to try and remember it, but I can get you it after this, like so you have a physical copy. But so basically like what I would recommend is so when you're in the hospital, you would want to pump as soon as you reasonably can after your baby's born. And so that means like I don't want you to miss out on like skin to skin time and like, meeting your baby and all the amazing things that are happening so that you can pump as soon as possible, right? But like, if they take your baby away for baths and stuff like that, like maybe that's a good time for you to pump. So I would start like as soon as you reasonably can. And if you get if you have a C-section, make sure that you get the okay from your healthcare provider. Um, and then I would start pumping probably around every 3 hours, just like, a normal newborn schedule. One thing I would also do is colostrum can be kind of difficult to pump. So a lot of people have more success with either hand expression or using a silicone pump like a Haka. So I would bring a Haka with you. And then also I would just kind of read up on how to do hand expression. And if your provider is okay with it, maybe practice while you're still pregnant. Some providers aren't big fans of that because it really depends on your personal history because there's a concern that like pumping while pregnant or hand expressing while pregnant could maybe trigger premature labor. So it's just something I would check before trying. But like if you're able to do that in the hospital as well, I would definitely try that. I think, did I get everything there? Did I answer everything?
Yeah, I added the link to the chat too.
Okay, great.
Your starter kit.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I have one, just curious if you have a partner, how can they help with your exclusive pumping journey?
Okay, so the number one thing I would say is that you are making the baby's dinner every night, and so your partner can wash the dishes. So it's
And
really
make
great.
you dinner, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So one of the biggest tasks of exclusively pumping is cleaning up afterwards. And so one thing that a partner can do that's really helpful is to just kind of take charge of that, learn how to do it themselves, and own it. And you know what I mean? Take control of that. Another thing I would say is, helping with the baby when it's time for you to pump and not doing the whole like, oh, it's time to pump again. Like I hear that so often in the Facebook group where partners act like they're the ones being inconvenienced by the pumping. It's extremely annoying and they should really be careful to proactively not say anything like that would be the other thing that I would say.
Great, thank you. Any other questions in the chat? Okay. Well, I really appreciate you sharing all of your knowledge from your experience and your stories. And we have this recorded, we'll put it on our website. Thank you for coming. And that is all. Thank you to our sponsor, Maine Mothering Company, also.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.